Hey, I decided I'm going to give you 2 chapters of The Mouse and the Motorcycle this week. I just want to make sure we have enough time to finish this book before school gets out. So let's get to it. When we left off, the maid was vacuuming. She accidentally scooped Ralph up in a bunch of sheets, and now he's trapped in this bundle of sheets with the motorcycle in a linen closet. So let's see what happens. This is the rest of chapter 7, the vacuum cleaner, and then we'll get to chapter 8 as well. All right. Ralph was deep in the hamper where no light filtered through at all. These sheets and pillowcases were on their way to the laundry, and since he had no wish to be laundered any more than he had wished to be thrown out in the trash, there was only one thing for him to do. Start chewing. Ralph ripped into the pillowcase with his sharp teeth, and in no time he had made a ragged hole which he crawled through. When he tried to pull the motorcycle after him, he discovered the hole was too small. He had to stop and chew it bigger. Before he could pull the machine along with him, Ralph chewed through another layer of cloth and then another as he worked his way upward, each time enlarging the hole for the motorcycle. His jaws began to ache, and still another layer of cloth lay ahead, this time in a damp bath towel which would make slow chewing. Ralph was forced to make a decision. Did he want to save his life, or did he want to be carried off to the laundry with the motorcycle? There was only one answer. He wanted to save his life. He must abandon the motorcycle. With aching jaws, Ralph chewed onward and upward, moving faster now that he was making mouse-sized holes instead of motorcycle-sized holes. The bath towel had left an unpleasant, fuzzy taste in his mouth. Gradually, light began to filter through the cloth until finally, when Ralph thought he could not force his jaws to close in one more mouthful of fiber, he emerged into daylight at the top of the hamper. Whew! Ralph gasped, rubbing his aching jaws and wading across the sheets to the edge of the hamper. He leaped lightly to the floor and, hugging the baseboard, scurried down the hall to room 215, where he had flattened himself and squeezed under the door. Safe but exhausted, he filled with remorse at the loss of Keith's motorcycle. Ralph dragged himself off to the mouse hole to catch up on the sleep he should have had that day. All right, so this chapter is called A Family Reunion. It looks like it'll be a reunion for the mice. The next thing Ralph knew, his mother was shaking him by the shoulder. Wake up, she said. Ralph, wake up. Room service has brought us another meal. Room service? Ralph rubbed his eyes, not believing what he had heard. Room service has brought our dinner? Yes, a real feast. A whole blueberry muffin and a chocolate chip cookie, said Ralph's mother. Get up. We're having a family reunion. It all came back to Ralph. Oh, room service, he said, understanding at last. You mean the boy Keith? He is room service to me. Ralph's mother sounded happy and carefree. Ralph sat up. Already his aunts and uncles and many squeaky cousins were arriving by secret paths in the space between the walls. It was a long time since anyone had had enough food for a family reunion, and there was a rejoicing in the mouse nest for everyone but Ralph. He was thinking of the motorcycle he had lost and the promise he had broken. He had a dull, heavy feeling in the pit of his stomach, and he did not feel like celebrating. Why, there's Ralph, squeaked Aunt Sissy, who thought she was better than the rest of the family because she lived in the bridal suite where she led her relatives to believe riches of rice fell to the carpet when the bride took off her hat and the groom shook off his coat. So, boys and girls, that actually did used to be a tradition. So, when people got married in a church, oftentimes, and I think they still do it, but oftentimes when the bride and groom would walk out the doors of the church, people would throw rice at them. Why rice? I don't know. Oftentimes now, I think it's more common that people blow bubbles, but I think rice is still sometimes thrown. So this aunt really does get to eat rice. It's not a myth. It's true. All right, the rest of the family knew Aunt Sissy was not as grand as she pretended to be because very few brides and grooms came to the hotel these days. My, how you've grown! Ralph never knew what to say when people told him he had grown. Well, if it isn't Ralph, said Uncle Lester, who had a nest inside the wall of the housekeeper's office where the maids dropped donut crumbs, and every morning at 10 o'clock when they had their coffee. "What's this I hear about you riding up and down the halls with a motorcycle?" Uncle Lester had a way of saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. "My land, a motorcycle?" said old Aunt Dorothy. "Isn't that pretty dangerous?" "Wouldn't you mind riding one myself if I were a few years younger?" said Uncle Lester. All the little cousins came crowding around Ralph. "Show us your motorcycle," they squeaked. "We want to ride it. Come on, give us a ride on your motorcycle. Ralph, huh? Ralph, come on, Ralph, please." Ralph knew he was expected to be polite to all his relatives, even the squeaky little cousins. Well, embarrassed and ashamed, he looked down at the floor. "I sorta lost the motorcycle in a pile of sheets and pillowcases." "Lost the motorcycle? Oh, Ralph!" cried his mother, genuinely alarmed. Ralph knew what she was thinking. Did this mean the end of room service? Did she have to go back to pilfering crumbs from his brothers and sisters? "That's a young mouse for you," said tactless Uncle Lester. "Can't take care of anything. If anybody asks me, I think it's a good thing he lost it. Riding a motorcycle is just plain foolhardy." All the little cousins looked disappointed and sulky. "I don't think he ever had a motorcycle," said one. "I bet he just made it up," said another, and the rest agreed. Ralph felt terrible. The family reunion swirled on around him. The muffin and cookies was divided. Cousins fought over the blueberries. Uncles, usually overweight uncles, asked for second helpings. Everyone talked at once. The little cousins finished their dinner and went racing around the mouse nest. The aunts and uncles raised their voices to be heard above the racket their children made. Suddenly, there came from the knothole a noise that drowned out the squeaks and squeals of young mice at play. Shh! Not a mouse moved. They looked at one another, too terrified to speak. "Psst! Hey, Ralph! Come on out!" whispered Keith at the entrance of the mouse nest. Ralph's mother gave him a little shove, but no one spoke. With the heavy feet, Ralph walked to the knothole, but he did not go out of room 215. "What do you want?" he asked. "You and your family better be quiet in there, or my mother will hear you. You know how she is about mice," Keith said. "I don't know why people say things are as quiet as mice. You sound like a pretty noisy bunch to me." Behind Ralph, his relatives began to tiptoe quietly away to their own houses, leaving his mother to do all the cleaning up. "Did you have a nice picnic?" Ralph asked, dreading what he must tell the boy. "Yes, we saw an old mining town with a real jail, with bars on the windows and everything." Keith reached into his pocket and pulled out something curved and hard and white with a rubber band fastened to a piece of Scotch tape. "I bought you a present," he said. "Come out." Puzzled and curious, Ralph squeezed through the knothole. "What is it?" he asked. Whatever the object was, he had never seen anything like it. "Half a ping-pong ball I found down in the game room," said Keith. "See, I padded the inside with thistledown and anchored the rubber band to the top of the Scotch tape." "What for?" Ralph still did not understand. "A crash helmet for you." Keith set the half ping-pong ball on Ralph's head and slipped the rubber band carefully around his whiskers until it rested under his chin. "There! That's just right. You need it big so there will be plenty of room for your ears. When you ride a motorcycle, you need a crash helmet." Ralph peered at Keith from under his new crash helmet, which rested lightly on his head. He knew he looked every inch a motorcycle racer, but never in his whole life had he felt so ashamed. He longed to crawl off into his hole and never face Keith again, but this conscience, which until now he did not even know he had, would not let him. There was nothing to do but stand there in the fine new crash helmet and confess. "Well, you might as well know," he told Keith. "I lost the motorcycle." "Lost the motorcycle?" Keith, who had been kneeling, sat back on his heels. But how? I wrote it by mistake into a pillowcase in a heap of linen on the floor, and it got dumped into the laundry hamper, confessed Ralph. You wrote it into a pillowcase? Repeated Keith. But you weren't supposed to write it in the daytime. You promised. I know, agreed Ralph miserably. I didn't exactly mean to write it. But you did. Keith's voice was accusing. Well, you see, the maid was vacuuming under the bed, and I began. Ralph and stopped. Oh, what's the use? I wrote it, and I lost it, and it's probably gone in the laundry room by now, and I'm sorry. The boy and the mouse were silent. Both were thinking about the little motorcycle with its clean lines and pair of shiny chromium exhaust pipes. That motorcycle was my very most favorite of all my cars, said Keith. I saved my allowance and I bought it myself. Ralph hung his head in his crash helmet. There was nothing more he could say. It was a terrible thing he had done. I guess I should have known you weren't old enough to be trusted with a motorcycle, said Keith. The boy could not have said anything that would hurt Ralph more. All right. So next week we will read another couple of chapters. And tomorrow I'll see you with a picture book. All righty. Bye, kiddos.